right, our next step in the Yard Office number 3 kit that we're all building here, or that I'm building for your intro tutorial, is going to be to paint our windows and doors to all match. We have some laser cut windows over here, some trim, and some windows and doors from Tichy that we're going to be painting. We're going to be painting them all the same color. So our first step in this process is to get the Tichy windows out. These are some barrels. We're going to put them aside for now because we don't need to paint those. What I'm going to do is hit these windows and doors that are plastic with a base coat of a white flat spray paint as a primer, and we're going to come right back when that's dry. All right, and we are back. The one quick thing I wanted to show you guys is the paint that I use as a primer. The paint is Krylon. It's a big can. I got the taller can. Krylon Color Master Flat White. Flat White is the best. I know you can get some cheaper paints out there, and if you follow our podcast, we've talked about the pros and cons of buying like the 99-cent and dollar flat black and flat white spray paints. I always just kind of pony up a little bit and buy the $2 or $3, I think this was like $4.99 or something at Lowe's, Krylon flat white, just because, especially the Color Master, because I think it leaves a really nice flat white look, and same with the black. It leaves a nice solid flat that's easy to paint on. So what we're going to do is we are going to use a sponge, not necessarily exactly like the instructions say for this kit particularly, and not all kits will tell you to use a sponge, but I find it easier to sponge paint your windows and doors because the sponge kind of gets into all those nooks and crannies. And to do that, we are going to be using a focus here. Come on, you. I know you can do it. There we go. Hunter Green Folk Art. And I'm going to go get my sea sponge really quick. All right, we're back with our sea sponge. Here is the Hunter Green. Oh, I'm sorry. Hunter Green Folk Art and the sea sponge. So what we're going to do is get our nasty paint palette, shake up our paint real quick, and we're going to paint the trim, which is over here, and the laser cut parts, as well as our Tichy windows with this Hunter Green. Put a little bit on our palette, and the idea with the sponge here is to get a little bit on our sponge, dab it over here, and then paint it so you get a solid, nice color. You don't want your sponge to be overloaded with paint because then it'll get globby and then you'll start missing some details. So let's get started on that. We're going to dip our sponge in, kind of dab off the extra here. That way your sponge isn't super saturated. And we're just going to sponge paint all of our parts here now. The plastic parts are probably going to take more than one coat, and that's okay. So we're going to hit them with our first coat. Let them dry. And the Hunter Green is a pretty strong green color. But I want this to be pretty vibrant green. I want it to be a nice green. Not all of our greens we use are this bright. Sometimes we use an olive color, which is more of a weathered look of a green, or more of an aged green. But I want this one to be nice and bright green. Well, not bright green, but more of a vibrant green. So first coat's done on our Tichy windows. Let's switch over to our laser cut parts. The only parts I'm not going to hit with the sponge are the steps because I don't want green stairs. So let's do the doors and windows real quick. I did not prime these. I'm going to do 2 coats of paint on these as well, and I don't know. I've primed them and I've not primed them, and I don't notice a difference really. So I just don't prime the laser cut windows anymore for the for a lot of the kits that come on these thinner laser cut windows, because I feel like too much paint, you start to lose some detail. So what we're going to do is hit them with coat number 1, and then let that dry a little bit. Over here, I'll just set that aside. Now we're going to get our 2 trim pieces, corner trims. Do the same thing. You probably should maybe use a undercoat of stain for this. I already started and I did not, but that's okay. We won't You might want to do at the same time you're doing the undercoat of stain for your walls where we did the Indie ink wash. You might want to come back over before you do this part and do the undercoat of stain on your trim corner pieces, but it's not a big deal if you don't. Just kind of adds a little bit of extra effect, but we'll survive. We'll get by if we don't. Need a little bit extra paint. Hang on. All right, add a little paint. Not much, but enough to get this done, and then do our second coats on the other windows and doors. So we're just going to wrap this up real quick, and we'll come back in a second. All right, our trim pieces are done, so we're going to set those aside for now. Just put them over here while they dry. And we're going to come back over to our Tichy windows and put a second coat of the paint on there. And I think the second coat will be enough to cover up all of the window and door. I think it'll be good enough. I like using the sponge even for some plastic parts because it gives the paint a texture. In my opinion, especially when you touch it with your finger while it's still wet. Anyways, in my opinion, the sponge gives the paint a texture. Even when it's solid and you don't really see much underneath it, the sponge just leaves a little bit of a texture with acrylic paints that you can't match with brushing it on. So I like to sponge a lot of my paints on now. Obviously, you can't get every detail. Sometimes you need to touch up, especially the tops of the windows and stuff. Sometimes you have to touch those up with a brush. But for the most part, that's good enough. I'm going to just add a little tiny bit more paint, maybe a third coat to these Tichy's. So we're going to dry those and come right back. Sometimes we like to cheat and let things dry quicker with our handy dandy snazzy pink hair dryer. So we're going to do that real quick. Okay. I did do a little bit of hair drying off the scene, so that's why it seems so quick. So we're going to hit that again really quickly with just a third coat, just to hit some of the white spots. There we go. Done with that. And that is it. That's all I'm going to do on these windows. I just like the texture that sponge brushing gives you. To me, it's unmatched. And we're going to do our second coat on our laser cut parts. These will not need a third coat just because the paint absorbs much easier. I'm going to, again, avoid the steps as much as I can because I'm going to paint those with a concrete paint later. Okay. I think that is good. We're going to have to let this stuff dry for a little bit. In the next video, we're going to show you how to assemble these and cut them out of the sprues. Obviously, the sprues, that's an easy thing to do. You just cut them out. They're ready to roll. But these take a little bit more work because we're assembling 2 or 3 layers sometimes of windows. So we're going to show you how we assemble these windows next, in the next video, which will be popping up over here on the right-hand side for a suggested video. So if you're following along on this build, click one of the links over here for the next step, and we'll see you over there. So we got our trim done today, we got our Tichy windows painted, and we got our laser cut windows. We avoided the stairs because we're going to paint those later with a different color paint. We don't want those to be green. But hopefully you guys are enjoying following along. As always, subscribe below for more of these videos and follow the next step over here. All right, later.